Good afternoon, everyone. President Allender, President Comrade Doug, Zone Commander, provincial officers, Mayor Henry, former Mayor Nancy Diamond, and Alan Pilkey, guests, comrades all. It was a surprise when President Allender and her committee called and asked me to speak at the celebration of the 85th anniversary of the Ladies Auxiliary Branch 43. May I take this opportunity to wish the Auxiliary the very best in the years to come. May all your endeavors be as fulfilling as the past 85 years. Her wish was for me to talk about my family and life in the branch and the Auxiliary. I am a past president and have been a member for 63 years and counting. I was awarded an honorary life membership. In total to date, my family and I have served for 333 years. 333 years. So friends, get comfortable. My parents, the late Stanley, known as Sid Brooks, was also awarded an honorary life membership, along with many other awards in the branch. He was elected president of the branch in 1940, took a hiatus, and again in 1950. And I will explain why the hiatus. My mother, the late Elizabeth Brooks, was a member of the Auxiliary till her passing, a member for 60 years. She never held office but worked on many committees through the years. As the Bible says, in the beginning. My father in the early 1900s, along with many other young boys and girls, came from the Barnardo's orphanage in London, England. They were shipped to Canada and placed here on farms. My father and his brother, Ernest, were raised on a farm, now as we know as Cullen Gardens, the corner on number 12 Highway north of Whitby. The family's name that raised him and his brother was Mr. and Mrs. Sunley. Ernest joined the Air Force during the Second War and now rests in a soldier's plot in the Oshawa Union Cemetery, thanks to the cooperation of Branch 43. When the First War began in 1914, at the age of 16, my dad enlisted in the Canadian Infantry here in Oshawa. He soon was sent overseas to serve his country. Fortunately, he stood the horrors of war. When he returned to Canada, he resided in Whitby and Oshawa. Here he met a young Scottish lassie from Glasgow. They were married in 1919. A year later, my late sister, Comrade Anne Crike, was born. Anne was also a member of the Auxiliary for 60 years. Although Anne was never president, she did sit on the executive and committees. Anne's happiest time was when she was working alongside with her comrades, serving on tables and helping in the kitchen. As the story goes, Mom and Dad became active in the British Empire Service League and the Great War veterans. This was prior to the beginning of Branch 43, which was, it came into being on July the 25th, 1927. That was their charter date. You might say they were pioneers. They too served here over 60 years until their death. And boy, do I have the medals and pins to prove it. My dad didn't have enough of the Army life when he was president of the branch in 1940. He enlisted in the Veterans Guard of Canada, guarding German prisoners until the duration of the war during the Second World War. My earliest memories is of a place that was called the Market. It was also known as a dugout. I don't know if there's anybody here that goes quite that far back. It was located on the corner of Richmond and Prince Street here in Oshawa. At the front was a huge fountain where the horses would come to drink. We are now still in the horse and buggy days. I recall the branch having picnics, and we all would meet there and be put in the back of a truck and taken to picnic grounds just north of Oshawa. And I have to admit, the name of that little park escapes me. Mr. Mayor, I neglected to say that through the 3.5 years after my sister was born, I was born here in Oshawa. That was the year Oshawa became a city. We're proud to have you as a mayor, John. Sorry to say, not too many of us are around yet to be able to say that. In the early days, the veterans met in the old City Hall, Simcoe Street North. And if I believe, if my memory serves me right, it was in the same building as a fire hall. And I can remember one of the policemen, and they used to go around with a motorcycle and had a chair attached to it. I don't know how you explain it. And he was an ethnic man, and he was needed in the city at that time. And he would ride around the city, and I can see him yet. And I know he resided right near Ritson Road School, because that's where I attended. Later on, they met also later on in the Rotary Park building. I recall my dad and many fellow veterans helped build the Legion Hall on Center Street. The ladies would provide the lunches even then, what they did on many, many occasions. I remember such names as Ben Jacklin, who incidentally, his daughter-in-law is with us today. I will mention her later. He became known to me as Uncle Ben. That was a camaraderie in those days. Other names were John Graves, the Salvation Army, Kelly Creighton, a lawyer, whose wife also joined this auxiliary. McIntyre Hood, Armitage, Rollo, Beaton, Davies, and you'll still see their son around this hall. Toms, Tierney, Wilcox, to name a few. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the name of Cram, parents of the past president, Edna Elliott, and the granddaughter, Elaine, is here today. Thank you, Elaine. During the Depression years, I recall seeing hundreds of workers, mostly veterans, parading down Simcoe Street. One person comes to mind, and that is a Comrade Joe Childerhose, grandfather of Comrade Mike, who is currently on the branch executive, I believe. Probably also membership secretary, is he not? And in that parade, the men all wore fedoras in those days. Not like today. They all wear ball caps. The branch also entertained. They put on a minstrel show. Couldn't do that anymore, not today, which I agree with. Past President Evans was the interlocutor in the show. Comrade Evans was mother to past President Fairleigh Bulkley. The auxiliary has assisted the branch for many years. Volunteering on many committees, Mom and Dad both worked on the dance committee on Center Street, and the auxiliary looked after the cloakroom. I can recall one night they had a Halloween dance. It was during the Second War. So I came with my mother. We were both very active in the auxiliary. My mother decided she wouldn't work that night in the cloakroom. She would get dressed as a costume on Halloween night. So when we came into the hall, we came in separately. I never associated with my mother all evening. We didn't want anyone to know who it might be. I can tell you my mother would sit out in the middle of the dance floor, and that's not like my mother, but she did it. Like the Indian, and she was dressed like an Indian, and she had the mask on and everything. Needless to say, she won first prize. But when she took the mask off, her face was beaten red. She had sat there all through that evening with that mask on. The auxiliary, to their credit, have been volunteering on the FAVI committee and decorating wreaths for many years, and still do. On November the 11th, Armistice Day, the auxiliary would gather as a group at the cenotaph in the same location every year, proudly wearing their berets. In those days, we had a very large membership, one of the largest. We would visit other Exoes in Toronto. One Exoe comes to mind is Todd Morton. We would go by great coach bus. We were stationed up by the Oshawa Hotel at that time in King Street. And we would fill 2 large buses, even the aisle seats. And we could sit in the aisle seats in those days because many of us girls were still very young. And then on the way home, we would sing old war songs, like Pack Up Your Troubles, and It's a Long, Long Way to Tipperary. We had large meetings in those days, and strangely enough, the comrades was always sitting in the same seats, as though they had their names on them. This side and that side, everybody sat here, sat there. I remember I always sat on the same side as Comrade Jacqueline here. When we catered to dinners, which were mostly branched functions or family weddings, unlike today, when the ladies finish cleaning up a glass, like today, when the ladies finish up, they enjoy a glass of wine. In the old days, it was a bottle of beer. What a happy and jolly group they were. After the meeting, some of us younger ones would go up to King Street to a Chinese restaurant for tea and a piece of pie. That was our night out. You couldn't afford to go anyplace else. So when you came to the Exoe, that was your night out on the town, so that's what we did. And Comrade Stezik, who was here, was one of those girls. Put your hand up, Comrade Stezik. Vicky? I guess she's not hearing me. I think Vicky's about 96, 97 years old. We had bingos, raffles, and bazaars to raise money. Again, some of the younger members would like to take on a different booth each time. In those days, nearly everyone knit or sewed. They assisted the branch at Christmas parties for our children, and there was a lot of them. A lot of children, that is. It was cold winters. At one time, they held them in the OCVI Collegiate in the late 1950s. The Zoe has catered to many funerals for years, and still do. Just as late as Saturday past, for a great veteran and legionnaire, the late Comrade Fred Anderson was laid to rest. Our condolences go out to you, Comrade Lorraine. And Lorraine is with us today. During the 2 world wars, the Exoe packed and sent boxes to the soldiers overseas. They held a special dinner honoring their First War veterans and their wives. Naturally, my mom and dad were present. We had many visits from our provincial officers, and let me tell you, were they ever strict, sticking to the Constitution. You would almost think they were generals, with all due respect to our current provincial officers. You may not remember, but I remember the name of Comrade Peg and that, and they were very strict. As a young Army wife, I assisted at the Blood Donors Clinic at Camp Riverwash, a camp that the soldiers helped build here in Ontario. It was up near Forest, Ontario. Later, I spent the remaining more years in Woodstock, Ontario, where my husband Cliff was an instructor in the Army, Canadian Drive and Mechanical School. He wasn't always instructing, obviously, because Alan was born there in September 1945. Comrade Cliff is also nearly a 61-year member of the branch. He was awarded the Order of Ontario, and just a couple of weeks ago was a recipient of the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. Our daughter Jacqueline was born here in Oshawa 12 years later, in 1957, who couldn't be with us today due to work. When I was elected president in 1953, local autonomy was that you could only hold office, that was presidency, for 2 years. And after a number of years, that changed. It was not very democratic. One of my highlights as president was when Comrade Marklin Jacqueline, who, as I stated, is here with us in the wheelchair here today with her back to me, and I attended the provincial convention in Ottawa. On our lunch hour, we walked up to the House of Commons. Outside of the building stood 2 Mounties on guard. We had our picture taken with them, of course, and they weren't allowed to smile. We asked to see the Prime Minister. They directed us to the East Block. They said he should be coming out soon for lunch. Sure enough, out came the Prime Minister, Saint Laurent, in his brown Homburg hat, which he always wore, and his associate, Mr. Pickersgill. Because I was so proud of my hometown, I said, I noted that you're not driving a GM product. He answered, but if you look closely at the glass, my dear, you will read the name, Duplate, Oshawa, Canada. I was still quite impressed. Little did I realize that on a number of occasions later on in my life, that I would be in the company of the Queen, the Governor Generals, and Prime Ministers. My, it's hard to be humble. But this was an honor that I have had, and I really feel it was a real privilege. Another privilege is being a member of the Royal Canadian Legion. It isn't everybody that can be. Not in the sense that they came or was a veteran, or that you were a mother, son, daughter, or whatever of a veteran. So it truly is a privilege in that respect. And as an activist and hoping for a better life for all in the Royal Canadian Legion and everybody around the community, the UAW-CIO and politics, I hope the best that I could do to help everyone. I hope that I have made a small contribution along the way. My younger sister, Comrade Agnes, who is here with us today, celebrating with us, has 32 years in the auxiliary. She held the position of Sergeant-at-Arms for many years, until her health no longer allowed her to do so. Agnes is also a recipient of an honorary life membership. The auxiliary is still an important part of Branch 43. They continue to help the branch financially and otherwise. We do enjoy also the music of Comrade Mel and his pipe band, especially on November 11th when we all gather here after the service downtown and at the other cemeteries, playing Amazing Grace. There are so many to tell, so many things to say. I have gone long enough. I've gone on long enough for an old comrade. I will be 88 next week. To President Allender, her office and executive, I say thanks for your continuing work and for the opportunity to recall many of the good memories in my later years and in my time around the Legion. You know, at one time it wasn't called the Royal Canadian Legion, it was just the Legion. But now, as we all know, it's the Royal Canadian Legion. God bless you all, and happy anniversary. I would at like this time, in honor of my late mother and father, who started all this, along with many other veterans and wives, I would like to ask Comrade Finney to see me after, and I would like to make a donation on their behalf to the Royal Canadian Legion Oshawa, Branch 43, Poppy Fund. Thank you all, comrades. Enjoy the celebration with us. Thank you very much.